And this is the fourth time in about 6 weeks that the jet stream has buckled into a new shape over the US, and forecasters say a fifth shift is already lining up for the final days of July. Compare that to the summer of 2012, one of the most infamous heat years in modern US history. That year, a single blocking pattern parked over the country and barely moved for weeks at a stretch. This year is doing something noticeably different, and that difference is exactly what's worth breaking down. Let's start with what actually happened, then compare it directly to that older, more familiar pattern. Right now, before comparing anything, let's be clear about what this newest shift actually is. AccuWeather meteorologist Elizabeth Danko says a big change in the weather pattern will arrive in the Northeast right around the time the calendar flips to August. That's genuinely good news on its own. Temperatures by the coming weekend are expected to run 5 to 10 degrees below normal across the east, according to the National Weather Service. But before that relief lands, forecasters are warning of one more dangerous stretch first. National Weather Service meteorologist Musi Kabede said the pattern will keep generating a dangerous, prolonged heat wave across the central and eastern U.S. through the end of the month. Daily highs well into the 90s and 100s, with little to no overnight relief, are expected right through July 30th. Florida is specifically flagged for record highs, around 100 degrees on July 29th, with the Northeast also close to record territory. That's the setup right now. But to understand why this particular summer feels so relentless, you have to look back at everything the jet stream has already done since late June. Part of the backdrop here is the El Niño pattern that the National Weather Service confirmed was present back in mid-June. Some meteorologists flagging the possibility of it developing into a super El Niño as the year progressed. Climate scientists have said conditions like these raise both the odds and intensity of heat waves during a given season. That doesn't mean El Niño alone explains every one of this summer's jet stream buckles, but it does describe the kind of charged atmospheric environment these repeated pattern shifts have been forming inside of. Let's lay out the full sequence, because this is where the real comparison starts to take shape. The first heat dome of this stretch built over the Ohio and Mississippi valleys in late June, expanding to affect more than 250 million people by the 4th of July. That heat wave brought the hottest weather of the year so far for many, and in some cases the worst in years, according to AccuWeather senior meteorologist Alex Sosnowski. New York City experienced its sixth worst heat wave since the year 2000 during that stretch. Widespread highs in the 90s with high humidity covered a broad area of the Mississippi and Ohio valleys throughout that week, with real field temperatures soaring above 110 degrees in some spots. That dome didn't fade quietly either. From July 4th through July 6th, severe thunderstorms tore that first heat dome apart, causing more than 1.3 million power outages and 4 fatalities. One supercell during that breakdown produced wind gusts up to 131 miles per hour, likely the second highest thunderstorm wind gust ever recorded in the U.S. That's buckle number 1, both forming and collapsing within about 10 days. Buckle number 2 came almost immediately after. The same jet stream that had just delivered the east's heat swung the pattern westward, building a fresh heat dome there instead. Phoenix hit 113 degrees. Salt Lake City set an all-time high of 109 degrees, and Billings, Montana reached 111 degrees, all within about a week. A temperature inversion developed beneath that western heat dome as well, trapping wildfire smoke over a broad stretch of the interior west and significantly worsening air quality on top of the extreme heat itself. That's the kind of compounding hazard that tends to show up specifically during these fast buckling transitions. Buckle number 3 arrived faster than anyone might expect from a typical summer. Instead of settling down, the heat dome rebuilt itself northward over the west, then surged into the north-central United States, then expanded east again by the middle of July. Forecasters at the time noted the same weather system trapping wildfire smoke in the southwest could also drive record high temperatures in the northern plains by the middle of July, describing it as an encore of the heat that had disrupted the holiday just a week earlier. That framing turned out to be accurate. Now we're looking at buckle number 4, the current record-threatening heat pushing through July 30th with a 5th shift already. Forecast to arrive right behind it at the start of August. That's 5 distinct pattern changes in roughly 6 weeks. Now let's bring in the comparison directly, because this is what actually explains why this summer feels unusual, even to people who remember previous rough summers. The summer of 2012 is still one of the most cited hot, dry U.S. summers in recent memory. That year's dominant feature was a single, extremely stubborn ridge of high pressure that essentially refused to leave. It anchored itself over the central U.S. for weeks, driving a historic drought alongside the heat. Crop losses that year were severe enough to push corn and soybean prices to record highs, since the same patch of ground kept baking. Under the same ridge week after week, with no meaningful rain breaking through. That's the defining signature of a true stationary block, damage that compounds, because nothing ever moves. Here's the key similarity between that summer and this one. Both patterns trace back to the same root cause: a jet stream that gets stuck in a slow, wavy configuration instead of moving weather systems through at a normal pace. Researchers who study this call it a blocking pattern, and both summers show the atmosphere locking into an unusually stable shape rather than cycling normally. That's the shared DNA between 2012 and what's happening right now. But here's the key difference that actually matters for how dangerous each pattern becomes. In 2012, the block stayed in one place. The same region baked for weeks under the same ridge, with drought compounding the heat as soil dried out and lost its ability to cool the air above it. This year's jet stream isn't staying still. It's buckling, collapsing, and rebuilding in a completely different location every week to 10 days, cycling the same intense heat across nearly every region of the country in turn, rather than parking over just one. That difference changes the nature of the risk in an important way. A stationary block like 2012 produces a slow-building, grinding, disaster, drought, crop losses, and a heat toll that accumulates gradually over an entire season. A cycling, buckling pattern like this year produces something more like a series of sharp, violent transitions. Each collapse has come with intense, severe weather, not gentle cooling, since so much stored energy gets released at once when a heat dome finally breaks. That's exactly why the July 4th through 6th breakdown produced a near-record thunderstorm wind gust and over 1 million power outages. A slow-fading 2012-style block rarely produces that kind of violent handoff because it never really breaks down fast in the first place. Think of the difference this way. A 2012-style block is like a dam that never bursts, just slowly overflowing the same valley for weeks on end. This year's pattern is closer to a series of dams bursting one after another, each release sending a fast, violent surge through whatever region happens to be downstream that week. There's a research angle worth mentioning here, and I want to be upfront that it remains debated rather than settled. Some climate scientists have proposed that Arctic warming, which is outpacing warming at lower latitudes, may be reducing the temperature contrast that normally keeps the jet stream moving briskly. The theory goes that a weaker temperature gradient can make the jet stream more prone to getting stuck in these wavy block-like shapes, whether that block stays put, like in 2012, or cycles rapidly like this year. Not every researcher agrees on how strong that specific link actually is, and it remains an active area of ongoing study. I'm including that angle because it's useful context for understanding why both of these pattern types, the stationary block and the cycling buckle, have become more of a recurring summer feature in recent years. It's not proof of a direct mechanism behind this. Let's also be honest about what forecasters can't promise. Even with this much data on the table, nobody can say today with certainty whether the pattern arriving in early August will be another quick buckle or something closer to a longer 2012-style stall. Long-range models can flag general tendencies a week or two out, but locking in exact timing and location that far ahead simply isn't possible with current science. What forecasters can tell you is what typically follows a pattern shift like the one arriving around August 1st. I cover pattern shifts exactly like this one almost every time the jet stream reshapes itself, because understanding whether a heat wave is about to stall or cycle actually changes how people should plan for it. So here's what this specific comparison means for you right now, heading into the final stretch of July. Treat the heat through July 30th as seriously as any earlier wave this summer, since Kabadi's warning about little to no overnight relief is exactly the condition that makes heat dangerous even for otherwise healthy people. Limit outdoor activity during peak afternoon hours, stay hydrated throughout the day rather than only when you feel thirsty, and make sure you have reliable access to air conditioning or a cooling center through at least July 30th. Check on elderly relatives or neighbors specifically, since overnight heat with no relief is when heat stress accumulates fastest in people without dependable cooling, and that risk doesn't disappear just because a pattern shift is on the calendar. Given how this pattern has behaved all summer, don't assume the big change arriving around August 1st means a clean, gentle transition. Every previous buckle this year has come with severe thunderstorms, flash flooding, or damaging winds rather than a quiet cool down. Keep your phone's severe weather alerts active through the first few days of August, not just through the heat itself. Based on this summer's pattern so far, the transition period right as the heat finally breaks has consistently been more dangerous than the heat wave's peak. If you're in an area prone to flash flooding, have a plan ready for potential downpours during that transition, especially anywhere that's already seen the ground saturated from earlier storms this summer. Saturated ground sheds rain fast, which raises flood risk even from storms that wouldn't normally cause serious flooding. Farmers and anyone managing outdoor crops or livestock should also pay attention to how this cycling pattern differs from a 2012-style stall. Unlike a stationary drought-driving block, this year's repeated buckling has at least brought periodic rain and storm activity back through different regions, which matters for irrigation planning and soil moisture even amid the extreme heat. If you track wildfire risk in the interior west, remember that this summer's pattern has already shown a tendency to trap smoke and worsen air quality, specifically during the transition windows between buckles. Keep an eye on regional air quality index readings even after a heat wave officially ends in your area. The bigger lesson from comparing this summer to 2012 is that a stuck jet stream doesn't always look the same twice. Sometimes it means one long, grinding heat wave that never leaves. This year, it's meant the same intense heat touring the entire country, buckling and reforming again and again. Once you see the pattern that way, this being the 4th or 5th shift in 6 weeks stops feeling random. It starts looking like exactly what an unusually persistent wavy jet stream does when it refuses to settle into a normal summer rhythm. If comparisons like this help these patterns actually make sense instead of just feeling exhausting, hitting subscribe means you'll catch the next shift as soon as it develops. I'll be back the moment this pattern breaks again with the real numbers on where it lands next.